Now, as we've already mentioned, Joe Biden has been causing plenty of chaos for the Harris camp, so much so that Axios is reporting that he has been booted from events because the Harris team thinks that Biden is a political liability. Now, why would they think that? That's right. When Biden isn't slandering millions of people as being garbage, he's biting babies. The media, of course, had a field day. Biden bites 3 babies at White House Halloween party, and the White House defends Biden for touching mouth to several babies during Halloween event. Now, the White House was quick to point out that in Biden's defense, the baby was dressed like a delicious chicken. It could have happened to anyone who skipped breakfast. And some in the media didn't even think a bite occurred at all. Some photos were being filed with captions such as Biden greets trick-or-treaters. Other images of Biden's baby biting described the move as having been done playfully. One caption described the move as kissing, while another appeared not to acknowledge Biden's bite at all. That's right, nothing to see here, just a very normal president being playful at a feel-good media event. Let's bring the panel in. Louise, this is shameful, a shameful protection racket that they're running
Absolutely.
for this man. And I did check the photos as well, and this has been filed by a lot of the agencies as well. They tried to make it seem like this was actually all a great feel-good moment. But when you watch it back, when you see the photos,
so cringy.
it is just absurd.
Yeah, it's totally legit. The photos been everywhere, all the pictures have been everywhere. It's not a deep fake situation as much as they'd probably like to make it that as well. But I don't understand why people put their kids and babies in front of politicians anyway. So that's one issue for me. But also, I do believe that Biden thinks he's probably helping the cause by looking like some sort of kindly grandfather, 81-year-old figure who loves children and loves the future voters of the countries. And the people who were putting their children in front of him seem quite happy to do it, and we're having a chat afterwards. But there's no doubt he had the kid's leg in his mouth. I mean, you can't dress it up in any other way, really.
From so many different angles and
yes.
3 different
And
babies.
why?
Sophie, let's bring you in. What do you think about this?
Well, it's just another disastrous Joe Biden stuff up. I actually feel for Joe Biden. He's obviously, in his 80s, and he's doing silly things. And I don't want to make fun of that, but this is dangerous what he's doing when it's just a week out from the election. He's making a fool of himself and causing harm to the party. These are headlines they don't want. They want the messaging to be on Kamala Harris and focusing on what she's going to do if she wins the election, not this distraction of Joe Biden, who we haven't seen much of, but yet again, there he is doing something silly, and this goes viral, and all the headlines are shifted away from Kamala Harris and back onto Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, that's why Harris does not want him to be there, because every time something weird happens, it takes the spotlight away from her messaging. I mean, that's a problem. But I mean, Sophie, to your point, I do agree that I do feel sorry for him a bit, but the Democrats have only themselves to blame. They said he wasn't mentally able to run.
That's right.
But he's been the president for the last couple of months. I mean, this bloke has the nuclear codes. He's sitting there putting babies' feet in his mouth.
That's
it's absurd.
Right. It's the same with Kamala as well, sort of criticising issues in America and saying, I want to change this and I'm going to progress that. She's been part of that administration.
It's her administration.
Exactly. And what has she done? Well, nothing, really. And I mean, maybe she quite likes Biden and his silly gaffes because it takes the heat off her and the fact she doesn't really have any authentic policies or anything to say to the American voters, of which she seems very disdainful of, I would add.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Let's move on, though, back to the Washington Post, which has infuriated its loyal base of radical lefty readers by failing to endorse Kamala Harris. Now, the billionaire owner, Jeff Bezos, explained his decision in a column which was published in his own paper, which argued that newspaper endorsements, well, they don't actually move the needle and they only serve to discredit reporting. He writes, what presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence, and ending them is a principled decision, and it is the right one. Now, that's a fair point on the surface, but when your newspaper radicalises lefties all over the world for several years with shoddy reporting, I don't think sitting on the fence at the last moment can change the perception of bias. and its own readers agree with me. And that's why 250,000 people cancel their subscriptions, because they want their paper to pick a side. Of course, as long as it is their side. And here in Australia, the whinging social media mob was so offended that they also joined the weird self-censorship boycott movement against their own paper. That includes Jane Caro, Mike Carlton, and the guy who dresses like a pirate, Peter Fitzsimons. And they all expressed outrage that the beloved Washington Post was attempting to be objective. Let's bring the panel back in. This is a really, really interesting one where you've got readers who are obviously in an echo chamber. They want their bias reinforced. They're looking at this paper to do that.
Yes.
And there's a fury when the paper is refusing to buy in.
Exactly. And what do they say? What do they think? How do they vote? They don't know, because their paper won't tell them what to do. They're sort of bereft of any sort of avenues or environment where they can actually think for themselves. And I guess with Bezos too, the other interesting point, he's so endemic in American lives, and you would argue Australian lives as well, through Amazon and his various other businesses. They had a reasonable assumption that he would take a stand either way. But, and the other element, of course, here is that people are saying that he's scared of Trump, so he won't come out and endorse either Trump or the Democrats. So it's mind-boggling for the Washington Post, Watergate and all that history, for them to be so
There's a long tradition.
cowardly.
You'd remember the front page, it's the Sun what won it.
Absolutely.
There's a proud tradition of newspapers saying, you're my constituency and we're going to advocate and lobby for what we think's the best interest. I don't have a
100%.
problem with that at
No,
all.
neither do I.
But
And
to
all
me,
those-
it's the
yeah.
backlash which is so funny.
Yeah, the backlash is it's very amusing, and it shows them they need to actually widen their readership circle and make their own minds up about things.
Definitely. Sophie, let's bring you in. Jeff Bezos, his explanation about endorsements creating a perception of bias. Do you buy that as an excuse? Some criticism against Bezos is, well, he's scared of Trump. If he comes out against him, he's worried that there may be some penalty down the line. What's your reading of the situation?
Well, I think it's the latter there, Jack, that he is worried if Trump is successful, he could make decisions that harm Jeff Bezos's fortunes, and that is why Jeff Bezos has to keep Trump at bay and not agitate him, because it's very likely he could win this election. So he's being extremely cautious here. And look, if people want to do, cancel their subscriptions as Peter Fitzsimons and Mike Carlton have done, well, that's their decision. But carrying on like this is really quite silly. We know the way the Washington Post thinks. They'll be quite upset if Kamala Harris fails next week. And I think Jeff Bezos is protecting his business interests.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's as if some of these people, Jane Caro and Mike Carlton, have just realised it's owned by Jeff Bezos for the first time. It's very funny. But look, while we're talking about endorsements, one paper managed to turn an endorsement into a multi-million-dollar windfall. The Guardian endorsement of Harris reaps a nearly $2 million boost after editor's email. Now, that's right. The paper, which is always talking about how independent it is, has decided to back in Kamala. Not that anyone is surprised, though, but the interesting thing here is that they've used the announcement to beg for donations, and they received millions of dollars. They have effectively monetised the endorsement stunt. And they even used the Washington Post's endorsement scandal as a reason to back in the Guardian. Back to the panel now. I mean, this is really interesting. Essentially, the Guardian has said, well, hey, the Washington Post, they don't have your best interests at heart. We do. The Guardian will stand up and we will barrack for a Kamala presidency,
Right.
which, the Guardian, obviously, they're free to make their own decisions. They have an editorial board. They do talk a lot about independence when they're raising donations. I think it's dangerous water for them.
It is, and certainly in the UK, where I worked for many years, the Guardian's brand has always been not to come down on the side of any particular party or any particular cause, unless it's sort of a socialist cause, I guess, in a way. And they were famous they were called the Guardian for many years. They were famous for the errors they used to make in print as well. So for them, I guess, to sort of try and hive off the WashPo audience and monetise it is very interesting, I agree, because it's moving on from their very
Don't you love when
impartial-
socialists become capitalists?
That's right.
They find a way
We've had a bit of that this
to
week,
make
haven't we?
millions
Yes.
of dollars. A bit of that. Sophie, let's bring you in. I've got to say, respect where it's due. That's a very clever tactic to raise funds. I think it does show how partisan and the fact that they do have a very, very vocal echo chamber of an audience willing to give them millions of dollars because they see it as helping their political candidate, their side of politics. I think that's dangerous. What do you think about it?
Well, they're free to do what they want, really, Jack. We know that The Guardian is left-leaning. Anyone who thinks it's not is living on another planet. But they're always pleading on their website for donations, always pushing that they are independent and don't, take any team. Look, this is a decision they've made because they obviously need to make money. I'm not going to knock them for that, but they've obviously seized on this moment.